years on from Taiwan's sunflower movement, what has changed? A young political party struggles to stay relevant. Taiwan is saying goodbye to cheap electricity prices. Plus, a record-breaking number of pilgrims gather for this sea goddess. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Betty Chen. It's been 10 years since student activists stormed Taiwan's legislature in protest over a trade deal with China. A decade on, the event's significance is still being debated. John Van Trieste has this report.
Taiwan's legislature has a reputation for heated debate and even physical fights between members. But 10 years ago today, it saw its biggest uproar ever, led not by lawmakers, but angry students. On the evening of March 18, 2014, lawmakers gathered to ratify a controversial trade pact with China. China claims Taiwan, and the opposition said opening Taiwan's service sector would give China another tool to threaten Taiwan's democratic system. Still, the ruling Kuomintang pushed the trade deal through after a review that lasted just 30 seconds. Before long, hundreds of protesters had gathered outside the legislature, angry both at the pact itself and the way in which it was forced through. Li Junda recalls what happened next.
不知道为什么就有一个梯子，然后我们就从梯子翻过围墙，没有什么警察，然后很多人就陆陆续续就冲进去、穿进去这样子。
Thus began an occupation of the legislature that would last more than 3 weeks. Students barricaded themselves inside, repulsing efforts by the police to get them out by force. Some would later try and fail to occupy the cabinet building too. They adopted as their symbol the sunflower, a flower that always turns away from dark toward the sunlight. Though they number just a few hundred, many more soon took to the streets outside in solidarity. A March 30th rally brought out more than 100,000 protesters.
那今天政府透过这样子的手法，30秒短短的30秒内通过这么重大的议题，我们实在是没有办法接受，因为这个攸关于全民的非常大的协议，是应该要好好坐下来讨论，听听人民的声音。
我们绑在头上的就是捍卫民主，退回服贸。然后我认为最重要就是台湾是一个民主国家，那么现在重要是它的民主 已经是受到破坏，所以造成了这些学生讲的所谓的宪政危机。
Inside the legislature, protesters drew up a list of demands. Chief among them, a fresh review of the trade pact and new rules to govern future agreements with China. In the end, they won. The government agreed to draft the rules before the pact was reviewed again. The students left the legislature on April 10th, ending a standoff unlike anything else in Taiwan's history. The agreement with China remains unratified. 10 years on, there are different ways of looking at the sunflower student movement. Supporters of the government at the time say the protests ultimately failed.
第一个，检讨黑箱，民进党执政黑箱更多啊。当时台湾的服务业很有优势，结果现在呢，中国大陆的服务业全部起来了。我们本来可以到大陆去，我们的服务业进军大陆去，赢得 更多的市场，就现在也没了。
Others, including scholars who've studied the movement, say it forced Taiwan to reconsider its ties with China, with consequences Taiwan is still feeling today.
I think sunflower movement actually initiated a trend and a reflection that are we going to go down with one China principle in economy, or we are going to choose the alternative? And I think that legacy still stays.
It may still be too early to properly assess the sunflower student movement. That's because the trade pact has never been formally abandoned. There have even been recent calls to revive it. After a decade, the big questions the movement raised, of how close Taiwan should get to China and of when direct action might be justified, are far from answered. James Lin and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
The sunflower movement sparked the creation of many small parties in Taiwan, representing the interest of younger voters. But the most prominent of these parties is now fighting to stay relevant. Tiffany Wang takes a closer look.
At a small office in New Taipei, the new Power Party is still hard at work, even as the momentum from the student protests that sparked its creation nearly a decade ago dies down.
的确，我觉得时代力量是因为太阳花运动而起来的一个政党。那这10年来，其实社会运动或是人民对于政治和未来的期待是逐渐变少的。
The NPP was known for its strong pro-independence stance and its rejection of China's claims over Taiwan, with its roots in the 2014 sunflower protests against the Kuomintang-led legislature's review of a services trade agreement that would have increased Taiwan's economic ties with China. The NPP was also boosted by its charismatic leaders who came to prominence during the sunflower movement. They included Cornell-educated legal scholar Huang Guochang and rocker-turned-politician Freddie Lim. The party was also known for appealing to a new class of progressively minded young voters, looking for an alternative to Taiwan's two-party deadlock.
The New Power Party was really sort of the formalized version of the Sunflower Movement's activism and spirit that wanted to see a meaningful change in Taiwanese politics. Really wanted to see the KMT not win another presidential election, but also felt a certain sense of dissatisfaction with the DPP.
In its first legislative elections, the NPP won 5 seats, becoming the third largest party after the DPP and KMT. But in this year's elections, the NPP didn't win a single seat in the legislature, leaving lawmaking up to the 2 largest parties and a newer third force party, the Taiwan People's Party. Experts say the NPP's organizational structure made it difficult for members to advance the party's goals, causing some of the NPP's biggest politicians to jump ship, leaving the party struggling to stay afloat.
Support for what the NPP stood for, anti-KMT sentiment, pro-independence politics, those didn't necessarily fluctuate and wane with the party's decline. Instead, what happened with the New Power Party was a lot of the internal mechanisms that made the party run were pretty disastrous.
But those left at the NPP say they are making do with a few resources they have, and that they accomplished a Herculean task.
我想每一个人离开时代力量都有他的想法，但不可讳言的是，在台湾的政治结构里面，作为一个小党，要能够发挥理想，要能够被看见，要能够拥有资源，都是非常不容易的一件事情。
Now, with no party holding a majority in the legislature, the third force Taiwan People's Party is expected to be the determining factor in future policymaking, including cross-strait relations. And if the trade agreement with China is brought up again, it's unclear which side they will take. But the NPP says they'll be waiting in the wings, still here to stand for those looking for an alternative to Taiwan's traditional politics. Scott Huang and Tiffany Wong in New Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
High demand for water has pushed Taiwan's third largest reservoir to below 40% capacity. On Sunday, Shimen Reservoir in the country's northwest was just below 38%. This is largely because of rice planting season, which uses up to 1.4 million tons of water a day. Officials say that water usage should drop significantly in the next few weeks, but warn that upcoming rains may not be enough to replenish supplies.
下的雨量是有限的，所以如果要等到更多的雨势，可能要等到后面更接近梅雨期的那一段时间。
Taiwan is set to raise electricity prices for all households and industries for the first time in many years. The move will impact heavy users the most, namely the country's major chip makers. Joyce Zeng reports.
After years of suppressing energy costs, Taiwan will raise both residential and industrial electricity prices in April. This will end 6 years of shielding people in Taiwan from soaring global oil prices. The move is making some people nervous, but others say they knew the artificially low prices couldn't last forever.
怎么涨那么多？我现在已经觉得蛮贵的了，而且夏天又要开冷气。
国际性的你们也解决不了。
电价一上涨，那所有的物资一定会上涨。如果说政府因为成本的问题要涨价，也希望它的幅度不要太大。
Over the years, Taiwan's state-owned power company Taipower has racked up more than $14 billion in losses to give the country some of the lowest electricity prices in the world. But that's set to change. Local reports say consumers that use under 500 kilowatt hours will face a 5% price increase, 7% for 500 to 1,000 kilowatt hours, and at least a 10% hike for users of over 1,000 kilowatt hours. According to Taipower, the average household uses about 300 kilowatt hours each month, and closer to 450 in the summer. Taiwan's premier has tried to ease concerns about the impact of these hikes.
使得电价的调整能够让各个企业都能够有充分的发展，而每一个家户也都能够负担得起。
The rate hike would hit major power users like chip giants TSMC and Micron the hardest. Addressing potential repercussions for Taiwan's most lucrative industry, Economy Minister Wang Meihua expressed confidence in TSMC's energy efficiency and said Taiwan's electricity prices are still lower than in other countries. With final rates still to be released, some people in Taiwan are already bracing to bear the costs. Howard Zhang and Joyce Zhen for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwanese chip giant TSMC has confirmed that it will build 2 packaging plants in southern Taiwan. The 2 facilities will be equipped with advanced chip stacking technology. The project comes out of an agreement between TSMC, the central government, and the Jiayi County government. Officials say it will create 3,000 jobs and help boost Taiwan's semiconductor supply chain. Vice Premier Zheng Wen-Can thanked TSMC for keeping its roots in Taiwan as it extends its global reach through overseas plants. Construction of the new Jiayi plants will start next month and should be complete by late 2026. A series of rallies have been held across the country to protest plans that would reduce the enforcement of minor traffic violations. Under the proposed changes, people will no longer be allowed to report traffic infringements like illegal parking or using a cell phone while driving. The protests were led by pedestrian groups, victims of traffic accidents, and families of people killed on the roads. They say the reporting system adds one more layer of safety and accountability to Taiwan's notoriously chaotic streets, but they face stiff opposition from drivers' groups.
只是人与车之间彼此的对立。那我在这里，我很沉痛的要告诉大家，绝对不会有往前走的结果，因为你今天抗议完了，明天换我抗议。
2 hikers have died after falling off a trail in northern Taiwan. The 2 men, both in their 60s, were hiking the popular Sandiaoling Trail in New Taipei when they fell off a narrow path into a valley, a fall of about 6 stories. The men were rushed to the hospital but were later declared dead. In a separate incident over the weekend, a man hiking Taiwan's tallest mountain, Yushan, collapsed on the trail leading to its front peak. His companion called emergency services and performed CPR, but when first responders arrived 4 hours later, the man showed no signs of life. Taiwan's longest on-foot annual pilgrimage has just kicked off from Baishatun on the country's west coast. Sally Jensen caught the record-breaking crowds this year at the beginning of the walk.
A record-breaking 180,000 pilgrims have signed up to join the sea goddess Mazu, at least part of the 400-kilometer round-trip journey along Taiwan's western coastline. That's a 60% increase on last year for one of Taiwan's biggest religious ceremonies, and worshippers followed the folk deity from her home in Baishatun, Miaoli County, to Beigang Township in central Yunlin County, and worshippers hope that she will bestow good fortune on them along the journey and for the year ahead. And this is a tradition that's been going on for over 2 centuries, and she has her roots, Mazu has her roots in China, but this event is unique to Taiwan. The number of participants growing year on year shows Mazu's timeless appeal, attracting people to join in this event that's not seen anywhere else in the world. Joseph Wu and Sally Edson in Miaoli County for TaiwanPlus.
The local Indian community gathered in New Taipei on Sunday to celebrate Holi, the Hindu festival that marks the arrival of spring. India's representative office in Taipei organized the event, highlighting the country's culture with live performances and other activities. Foreign Minister Joseph Wu also took part in the event. Taiwan's labor minister stirred controversy earlier this month over remarks she made about the skin color of Indian migrant workers. But the foreign minister said Taiwan-India ties remain strong and that Taiwan welcomes Indian students and professionals. Coming up, another volcanic eruption in Iceland's once silent peninsula. Stay tuned.
Start your weekend with a cup of coffee and a moment to reflect on what happened this week.
Hello and welcome.
we've got you covered, from defense and politics to high tech and the arts.
Not just to Taiwan, the whole world is watching.
You make the coffee, we make the news. Here's what happened on TaiwanPlus.
For more stories from here in Taiwan and around the world, visit us on social media or follow our website at TaiwanPlus.com.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Russian President Vladimir Putin has cemented his grip on power in a landslide election victory. As Rosie Greninger reports, the election has been widely criticized as being neither free nor fair.
Victorious, Vladimir Putin takes the stage in Moscow. The Russian leader retains his grip on power for at least another 6 years after an expected landslide election win, claiming 87% of the votes. It will be his 5th term as president.
И, конечно, сегодня, в тех условиях, в которых мы живем, особые слова благодарности нашим воинам, ребятам, которые на линии боевого соприкосновения обеспечивают стране условия ее развития и существования, которые...
The long-standing leader was up against 3 other candidates. But rubber-stamped by the Kremlin to ensure Putin's win, these politicians weren't considered serious challengers and racked up only a tiny percentage of the over 100 million votes. Any serious opponents of Putin, jailed, exiled or dead. But there was defiance in the form of peaceful protests, dubbed Noon Against Putin. Large queues of people arrived to polling stations across Russia at midday, spoiling their ballots or voting for any other candidate to highlight opposition still exists even if official results don't show it.
The election in Russia is mostly falsified. That's why we are staying here, to show how many people against Putin.
At least 80 of those protesters were arrested. Similar demonstrations were held at Russian embassy polling stations in several other countries, including London, Paris and Milan. They were heeding the call of Putin's most prominent opponent, Alexei Navalny, who died suddenly in jail last month. His widow Yulia joined protesters in Berlin.
Наверное, вас интересует, что я написала в бюллетене, за кого проголосовала. Разумеется, я написала фамилию Навальный, потому что так не может быть, чтобы за месяц во время президентской кампании, за месяц до выборов, главный оппонент Путина, и так находящийся в тюрьме, был убит.
Putin addressed Navalny's death for the first time in his victory speech, saying it was an unfortunate development and he'd been open to releasing Navalny from jail under certain conditions.
Мне некоторые коллеги сказали, и не сотрудники администрации, некоторые там люди сказали, что есть идея обменять господина Навального на некоторых людей, которые находятся в местах лишения свободы в западных странах. Вы можете мне поверить, можете нет.
But there is a lot the international community questions about Russia, including the election. The UK and US labelled the voting process not free nor fair, while Ukraine, currently at war with Russia, sent drone attacks across the border during the 3 days of polling, destroying oil production facilities. Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky also slammed the election.
Жодної легітимності у цієї імітації виборів немає та бути не може. Цей діяч має закінчити на лаві підсудних в Гаазі. Саме це ми маємо забезпечити усі в світі, хто цінує життя і порядність.
The results mean Vladimir Putin will lead Russia until at least 2030, making him the country's longest-serving leader in more than 200 years, overtaking dictator Joseph Stalin. And despite the criticism, Putin is using his overwhelming triumph as validation of his continued invasion of Ukraine and vindication of his defiance of the Western world order. Eason Pan and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
The U.S. will issue the first ever guidelines for tech companies to prevent attacks on human rights defenders online. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced a plan at a summit for democracy in Seoul. Blinken urged other countries to join the initiative, which focuses on AI and digital threats to democracy. 6 countries have already signed up, but Blinken says more cooperation is needed to protect the next generation.
We will advance progress for people in all of our countries and around the world. It's a tremendous responsibility, but we have to meet it in this moment because, again, I'll close with this. This is moving so fast. It's moving so quickly that what is decided now and in the weeks and months ahead is going to shape the future for generations to come.
Rio de Janeiro set a new thermal sensation record of more than 62 degrees Celsius on Sunday. Thermal sensation is measured by combining temperature and humidity levels. The higher both of these figures are, the hotter it feels. Rio began recording these figures in 2014. Residents of Rio's western Guaratiba neighborhood swarmed to the beach to find relief from the heat, but some people said there wasn't enough water to drink or keep cool. Dramatic images coming out of Iceland as a volcanic eruption in the country's south has triggered a state of emergency. As Leslie Liao reports, this is the 4th eruption in the area since last December.
Liquid hot magma, the earth torn asunder. This spectacular footage comes from Southern Iceland, where a volcano erupted over the weekend, marking the 4th time in recent months. Volcanic fissures first formed here last December, with subsequent eruptions taking place in January and February. Iceland's government has now declared a state of emergency.
There was a lot of material coming out, more than in the previous eruption, so lava was flowing quite fast.
Lava flow from the eruption has reached defensive barriers in nearby Grindavik, but some people remain in the small town.
The barriers that were built around the town, they are diverting the flow around it. Most of the flow is going east of the town towards the sea, so it looks like the barriers are really doing the job they were designed for.
Damage to infrastructure is another concern for officials. Lava is perilously close to a geothermal power station, and there's fear that the molten rock could damage fiber optic cables and roads. The lava flow has slowed down since the initial eruption, but officials are still monitoring its movement. If the melted rock reaches the sea, there could be consequences, like chlorine fumes or small explosions as lava interacts with seawater. Scientists are still trying to predict the future progress of the eruptions. For now, it's hoped the state of emergency can help keep everyone safe while nature takes its course. Alex Chen and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
Roughly 1/3 of the world's population does not have stable internet access, but a chatbot powered by artificial intelligence could possibly change that. Harrell Hughes tells us more.
This is Kehinde. He lives in Nigeria and has a visual impairment. He has limited access to equitable technology. And as an animal and geology enthusiast, a lot of Kehinde's questions went unanswered. But an artificial intelligence chatbot is changing that.
Please ask your question after the tone and press any key when you are done.
What are some of the habits of a lion?
1. Social animals. Unlike most cats, lions are incredibly social animals. Lions are predominantly nocturnal and rest for up to 20 hours a day.
I can't just be moving from one individual to another who is using a smartphone in order to say, okay, I want to ask a question. I was finding it so hard, but let's say I can say it is because of me this company was brought up.
In Nigeria, more than half the country's population of over 200 million people does not have internet access or a smartphone. This chatbot tool was created by a company called Viamo. It's powered by AI and works anywhere, even offline.
We understand that these people are disconnected because they are currently offline, do not have a mobile phone to access information, and also they do not have a smartphone that they can use to access information on the internet.
The tool can be used by anyone.
Hello and welcome to the Viamo platform. Please ask your question after the tone and press any key when you are done.
Like David, who is using it to learn more about expanding his business.
Thank you for helping me. How can I really start my business in Nigeria?
For David and Kayinde, it's both useful and affordable.
For people who are not that financially buoyant, they still have this opportunity to use even the little as 10 naira to ask a lot of questions that will actually benefit them. I'm so happy.
Viamo also partnered with UNICEF to provide important information on HIV/AIDS, tropical diseases, water sanitation, and more. The plan is to expand to other marginalized areas around the world to ensure that even the most remote communities can stay connected. Joseph Wu and Harel Hughes for TaiwanPlus.
The city of Tainan has removed a road sign for a famous tourist attraction after visitors pointed out its humorously misspelled English translation. The road sign reading Anping Tree Mouse was not for a zoological attraction. It was a typo for the Anping Tree House. City officials apologized for the mistake, which they say is an embarrassing oversight for a city trying to be an international tourist destination. This sign is not the only case of its kind. Visitors have noted mistakes on the signs for Zhengwen Reservoir and Xinhua Wude Temple, with inconsistent translation for other attractions. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally today, check out this carnival parade in North Macedonia celebrating the Orthodox Christian holiday of Trimery. I'm Betty Chen. Take care and see you next time.